So, have you ever looked at a map of Europe and noticed this little spot here? Why is a random bit of Russia sitting in the middle of Eastern Europe? That's weird, right? Well, this area is called Kaliningrad, but it used to have another name, a much more famous name, a name that conjures up a lot of other imagery, emotions, and feelings. This spot used to be called Prussia, and how Prussia became Kaliningrad is one of my favourite World War II stories. Because the battle that happens here is so cinematic, it is amazing there aren't more movies about it. In fact, not only are there not many movies about it, it rarely even gets mentioned in most Western histories of World War II, despite the fact it is, objectively speaking, one of the most spectacular battles of all time. But first, we need a bit of context. In 1941, Germany invaded the Soviet Union, and after 3 years of brutal war and more than 20 million people dead, the Red Army had finally pushed the Germans back to their border right there in Prussia. It is also important to note that Prussia isn't just any state in Germany, it is the state, the historic heart of both German imperialism and militarism, and is the state that led to unification of Germany back in 1871. The point being, this is a really important state for Germany, so they are pulling everything back to defend the capital at Königsberg. But at the same time, since the Red Army has been in unbroken contact with the Wehrmacht for 3 straight years, they have been learning all of the tricks and tips about modern war from the army that did it best. But by this point, the Red Army has now surpassed the Germans in both size and quality to become not just the biggest army in history, but also the best. But up until this point, this story could be any old battle on the Eastern Front in 1945. What makes this particular battle so special and unique is the city of Königsberg itself. It's nestled on a hill built into a massive medieval fortress. Now, medieval fortifications are of course very obsolete by 1945, but it turns out a machine gun nest poking out of a medieval castle wall is still a pretty effective defensive strategy. In fact, the entire city is made up of overlapping and interlocking defensive positions built into the old medieval structures. Also, because this is a medieval city, the streets are very narrow, and that makes the large Soviet tank columns very hard to move through the city and very easy to ambush. On top of that, Königsberg is a harbour city, the easternmost harbour city in all of Germany, and the remnants of the German Navy have been hiding there to escape the endless onslaught of the US and British bombers, including the battle cruisers Admiral Scheer and Lutzow, whose enormous guns are now pointing at the only path into the city. Now, the Red Army, when they entered Prussia, expected a rapid victory, as they had been enjoying for the past 6 months of offensives against the Germans. But they would be fighting here for nearly 4 months, and the death toll is staggering. At least 100,000 people will be killed in this battle. But numbers never capture what the horrors of war really look like on the ground. So to give you an idea, this is a battle where there are explosions everywhere, all the time, in the middle of cobblestone streets and crumbling medieval towers and walls. There are flamethrowers being used everywhere in this battle. And the Russian assault engineers, who are the guys who are mainly using these flamethrowers, start to wear basically medieval armor to try and survive the storm of steel and rocks flying everywhere. Oh, and did I mention the friggin' battleships that are firing guns into the city? This battle is hell on earth for everyone in this city, including the Wehrmacht, the Red Army, and of course, the thousands of civilians caught in the middle of it. As a testament to just how ferocious the fighting is in this entire campaign, the leader of the Red Army on this front is a guy called Ivan Chernikovsky, who has been such a brilliant commander through the war that he has become an army front general at only 37 years old, and he's one of the front runners to become the next premier of the Soviet Union. That is until even he is killed in this battle. Towards the end of the battle, there's even a German version of Dunkirk, where every civilian ship in the city will just grab as many people as they can and sail to Sweden in the hopes of becoming refugees there. And there are moments when all these civilian sailing and fishing boats are fleeing the harbour, passing the battleships as they fire into the city. Like, it's truly cinematic, this battle. But in the end, the Red Army is simply too strong, and the Imperial German flags that have been hanging over the city forever would finally fall, and the hammer and sickle would fly. The war in Europe would end only a month later, and in the peace treaty, the Soviets were surprisingly lenient on the parts of Germany they controlled, considering the Germans had invaded the Soviet Union with the intention of colonial genocide. The Soviets in turn merely ordered a denazification program, the trial of war criminals, and the adoption of socialism in East Germany. A pretty lenient sentence, all things considered. With one exception. Prussia would be the one area where the Soviet Union took their revenge, who, after seeing the Germans torch and starve hundreds of their villages and cities and kill more than 20 million of their comrades over 3 years, the Soviets weren't feeling too generous towards German militarism, and they decided that Prussia, the heart of German militarism, would be culturally erased from the planet. And that's why if you go to Kaliningrad today, you won't even see the German language. Every city, every town, and every street sign is in Russian. Every imperial statue and work of art is gone, and the mighty imperial city of Königsberg, that was once the seat of power all the way back to the Teutonic Knights, is now named for Mikhail Kalinin, one of the heroes of the Soviet Union. And I think it is worth noting how emotionally important this city is for both Germans and Russians, because long after the fall of the Soviet Union, it is the only Russian city that is still named for a Soviet leader. Anyway, I think it would make a great movie, but of course we will never see it made here in the West for the same reason the only Eastern Front movies we get in the West are nonsense like Enemy at the Gates, which is shameless anti-Soviet propaganda. Because if you tell the truth about anything on the Eastern Front during World War II, you quickly learn about the incredible sacrifice, immense suffering, hard work, and dedication the people of the Soviet Union had towards defeating fascism in Europe. The same fascism that the West would immediately forgive and rehabilitate and rebrand into NATO as soon as the war ended. But if the sacrifice of every American, Brit, and other Western ally is to be venerated and remembered with solemn reflection every year, then so too do the Red Army soldiers who in this one battle lost more people than all the Western allies combined lost in the entire Battle of France. Anyway, this video is dedicated to my friend Grayson, who has recently taken an interest in the Second World War, and I promised I would make him a video talking about some of the stuff the Western histories don't really teach. So Grayson, hope you enjoyed this one, and hopefully it has given you something to think about.